U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, and United States Trade Representative Jamieson Greer are heading to Paris tomorrow to meet with Chinese officials. The meeting coming ahead of President Trump's expected trip to Beijing, and a new wave of Section 301 investigations. Joining us right now is Ambassador Jamieson Greer. Good morning to you. Let's start with this meeting, and then we can get into tariffs and everything else. What are you hoping to achieve at this meeting?
It's good to be with you this morning. Like a lot of our meetings we've had with the Chinese over the past year, we want to ensure continued stability in the U.S. China relationship. It's one of the most important economic relationships in the world. We want to make sure that we continue to get the rare earths we need for our manufacturing base, that they keep buying the kinds of things they should be buying from us, and that the leaders have a chance to get together and make sure that the relationship's going the way we want it to go.
Where do you think that relationship is, given that it's one of the few countries, unlike the others, that actually had reached deals on tariffs? They've never reached one. And how does the conversation change given the situation in Iran?
Well, when you look at where we are with China versus 1 year ago, we have a much more balanced relationship with China. I've been saying for a year, where do we want to be with China? We want relations to be stable. We want our trade to be more balanced. We want it to be a non-sensitive goods. And so our trade deficit with China in goods has gone down by 30% over the past year, 3-0. That's a big change. Our imports from China in January were the lowest they've been since 2004. And again, that's not to say we're not going to trade with China. We certainly are, but it's getting to a much more balanced situation.
Can we discuss, though, this situation with Iran? Because clearly that's weighing on our markets, it's weighing on the price of oil, and by the way, weighing on their economy as well.
It is. So when it comes to energy and the effect of the Iran war, it doesn't so much affect U.S. China economic relations directly between us. Obviously, China relies on oil from Iran. The United States, we're a huge producer of both oil and LNG, but we do export and import a lot. We're a net exporter, but we do import a lot, and we refine here. We import refined products as well. I think what you want to look is what are the feedstocks doing in China, because some of these hydrocarbons go into the plastics industry, the chemicals industry in China. I think we're more resilient on that front because we have a lot of domestic feedstocks and hydrocarbons. So we'll be watching how that might affect the Chinese economy and their ability to produce at the huge volumes they've been producing over the past several years.
What is your expectation for how quickly this war in Iran is going to end? And if it doesn't, what do you think the global impact is going to be?
Well, I think that we're talking in terms of weeks, right? When I speak with Secretary Hegseth or with the president or others, they're much closer to it. But obviously, you can't talk about trade without the Iran war coming up and the effect of oil and gas and what that means. I think we're talking about a matter of weeks. Our expectation is that any effects we see will be short-lived. But we want to watch this, right? You could see other effects that affect cycles that we tend to see in commodity markets. So we're watching it very closely, especially in if there are particular spikes or if there are areas where we think we have more resilience.
Which piece of this so far was not on your bingo card in terms of expectations? And I only ask this because I think when the attack was first made, there was a sense that this was going to end very quickly. I don't want to say it was going to be a cakewalk, but I think there was a view that it would be something more akin to that, and it clearly is getting more complicated rather than less, despite whatever successes we seem to be having.
Well, I don't work in the Pentagon. I used to serve in the military many years ago, but all I know is the Pentagon for years and decades has been planning for these kinds of contingencies. We saw the president and his security team execute historic victories in Venezuela. We saw what they did with Iran and the Fordo site last year. I have full confidence in the team that they've planned out all the different scenarios, not just the military scenarios, also the economic scenarios. Again, I think that they're looking at a matter of weeks. When I talk to the secretary, we talk about their levels of missile launches and drones. All that has gone down by 80-90%. There's a finite amount of ordnance over there that the Iranians have, and Pete and others are in a better position to talk to you about it. But that's how it looks from my perspective.
Ambassador Greer, there was a court filing where a Customs and Borders Protection official said that the government is somewhere between 40 and 80% towards building a system to refund the more than $165 billion that in tariffs that were collected that were then ruled illegal by the Supreme Court. They said that they expect that system to be up and running by the middle of next month. They have an online claim portal where I guess importers and brokers will submit their requests for refunds along with interest. Is there a chance that U.S. taxpayers will lose money on the tariffs that were instituted to try and bring money in if we are paying back those very tariffs with interest?
Well, remember, Democratic attorneys general, they argued for these cases. They asked for the money to go back to companies that were importing goods. That was their ask to the court, and they got their wish, was to take money from the U.S. Treasury that could have been used to pay down the debt or other things and give it back to companies who import foreign goods made by foreign workers. So first of all, there is money going out of the Treasury, or that could, and it's because Democratic attorneys general wanted that. Interest payments, those are par for the course. If that happens anytime, the government has to refund money or anything like that, there's always some kind of interest associated with it.
But it's U.S. taxpayer dollars that would be used to fund the interest if that's the case.
Well, I don't know where Treasury is going to have that. I don't know where they pay the interest funds out of. I'll talk to Scott. The point is that the attorneys general of Democratic states, they wanted this money to go back to companies who are importing foreign goods, and they got their wish.
Ambassador, would you and the administration encourage companies that had higher costs during this period to seek refunds, that paid tariffs to seek refunds? And I ask because I've talked to a number of CEOs who have thus far been holding off seeking those refunds, worried potentially about the possibility for retribution for seeking such a thing.
Well, if I were these companies and somehow they get this windfall, the most important thing and the smartest thing they should do is give it as bonuses to their workers. The whole reason the president imposed these tariffs was to try to reshore, to fix our massive imbalance in trade that we've experienced over many years because of China, Vietnam, the EU, and others. If the companies are going to get this windfall, they should pass it along to their workers as a bonus or a raise, because that's the purpose of the program. It's always been the purpose of the program, and the American people should get it, and the companies should give it to their workers.
In terms of the next stage of these tariffs, 301 and otherwise, these investigations that are taking place, how quickly do you think those investigations take place? What kind of reports need to come out of them, and then how quickly can those tariffs be implemented?
So the Section 3 program, these are the types of investigations that USTR, my agency, has done in the past. They're very process-driven, they're transparent, there's an opportunity for hearing, for public comment, and then we typically produce some findings. It could be in the form of a report or otherwise. And if we find that countries have been involved in unfair trading practices like subsidies, excess capacity, allowing goods made with forced labor into their countries, we can quantify that harm to U.S. commerce and then try to resolve that issue with the country. If they can't resolve it or don't resolve it sufficiently, you can impose a tariff or fee or something like that. We're trying to move very quickly to your question. We're trying to move in a matter of months. And with that, we can try to resolve some of these issues that have been plaguing the global trading system for many years, and we're finally trying to solve.